Okay. Hello, everyone. We have a very special conversation here on exploring grief with Marco Debie, and I'm so honoured to have him here and share with us some of the work that he does. But before we do that, for our men that watch or wish to explore this topic of grief, I just wanted to do a very quick recap on grief, and we will sort of go into it a little bit in a bit more depth later on in the interview. But I just wanted to sort of re-clarify that grief is something that we feel when we have loss, when we have a longing for something, or we feel lost. And so I feel that for our men, it's a really important topic to share. And myself and Marco have had the opportunity to talk about it quite in depth before this recording. So welcome, Marco. Thank you so much for being here. And your business is called Mago Menla. Did I get? Yes. So first of all, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I was a bit surprised. I'm like, oh, grief? I don't know. But yeah, it's really nice to be here and explore that together. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. So as we've had this, as I mentioned, we've had this opportunity to sort of talk a little bit about this topic. So share with everyone a little bit more about what Mago Menla means.
Oh yeah, so Mago Menla is my business name. So yeah, often people think it's my name or some given name, but it's more straightforward. So for me, my life, coming from Holland and yeah, having coming out of a very self-destructive lifestyle in my 20s. And there was the two things that kind of probably saved my life. One is Didjeridu and spending my time with my Indigenous mentors and also my Tibetan yogic teachers and the practices of those lineages. And Mago is the word for Didjeridu in the Rembarrnga and Maili languages of Central Arnhem Land. So Mago is one of the traditional names and of the people that I'm most connected with up north, Rembarrnga Maili mob. So most of my connections are from those language groups. And Menla means medicine in Tibetan. So it means Didjeridu medicine, but it's also two words of those two traditions that really, I would say I carry in my heart, but that carry me through life probably.
Yeah, I love that. So just to share with you all, if you haven't come across Marco before, Marco is located on the Sunshine Coast, and he is, I would say, quite an active member in our community, working with men in particular working with the Didjeridu groups and courses, and using that as a tool to take men on a bit of a journey through breath work and meditation, but also learning this wonderful practice of the Didjeridu. So it's this sort of sound healing. I noticed that you've also got the sort of integrative sound therapy. So is there anything else with the work that you do that you'd like to add there?
Yeah, so for me personally, Didjeridu, as always, like I said, Didjeridu saved my life. It was the first thing. It's a long story, and we're not going to get into that now, but yeah, long story, very short. From a very self-destructive lifestyle in the 20s, I came in touch with the Didjeridu in Europe, connected with one of the major world-leading Indigenous players, Mark Atkins. He's a Jamaji man from WA, and through some situations, and we ended up becoming really, really good friends. I became a promoter for some of the artists, traveled to Europe with them, spent a lot of time, and that completely was my first steps in going a different direction in my life. And also through, so for me, Didgeridoo has always been not just about playing music, but then later through the years, also from meditation practice with my Buddhist teachers, also from martial arts in the past in my teens, really seeing the similarity of all the breathings, that lower than Chan, that living from that sacral chakra, not just breathing there. And so for me, Didgeridoo always became more and more about the breath, really. And also one of my main mentors, he said, oh, you got to learn to play it from there. And he pointed really below my navel. And So what do you mean? I play it with my lips and with my tongue. He said, yes, but you play it from there. And so what does it mean? Oh, it don't matter. Just play it from there. And it took me a long time to work that out. And then there are some more things. And at some point, things start falling in place. I'm just not gonna get into that now. But for me, Didgeridoo is a very powerful way Didgeridoo playing. It's like a pranayama practice. It's a regulating your rhythm breathe. You bring in your mindful awareness meditation. And then when I sit with some of my elders like Rembarrnga, when she talks about the Nalandaku and also what that is as a meditative state, very similar than the shamatha meditation and stuff. And so it's a mindful awareness practice. It's a pranayama practice. And it's a self sound healing. Because if you play Didgeridoo, the sound waves, they bounce back up through the ditch. They don't just go out. So you feel that coming back in your body. So I find that really, it is a really calming, grounding, centering practice. And from there, many men who learn to play, they also become interested in culture. So I run events with Indigenous facilitators with some of my brothers, and we do retreats where men, have the opportunity to get more into that aspect of it. Yeah, so that's for me, Didge. And when I start teaching again, I didn't teach for about 7 years, but some of my mentors, they were like, hey man, you should start teaching again. And I said to Mark, I said, I want to teach, but I want to do it this way. I want to really focus on the breath. And I explained him how I would like to go teach Didge. And he said, yeah, do it. That's your thing. That's going to be your thing. So do it. So I stepped up into that. And and then the sound therapy more like one-on-one work and just group sessions and stuff, sound healing.
Yeah, it's very powerful. I personally have men that I have met that have done work with you, and it was life-changing for them. It literally activated something within them that began their own healing journey, and very, very quickly changed their life, the trajectory of their life to be a much more whole and, to move through all of that trapped sort of trauma and tension and limitation. So very, very powerful.
It is very, also the Didgeridoo courses and stuff. It's really, of course, Didgeridoo is part of it. I would say by stealth, we do men's work and meditation, but it is because it's very accessible. It's not daunting. It's not some, transformation, blah, blah, blah. It's just about men getting together. But at the same time, yes, we do work with the feelings. We do work with meditation. We do work with pranayama. And I've known quite a few guys who were making their first steps and through this course met other men and now are really beautifully on their journey. So I feel very, very honored to be in that space that is accessible. And also a lot of men come who are already breathwork facilitators themselves and stuff, and they just want to, learn the instrument and stuff. So there's always a good mixed group of where people are at. We all carry and hold each other. Beautiful.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. And it's been, I think I read that it's been 23 years since you've been you first started playing the Didge.
25 now. Yeah.
25.
I don't update my website, so
that's fine. So I think it's probably a good time for us to revisit. So I did that little introduction at the start of grief, and that's in a very, very broad, but I think to revisit and hone in a little bit more on grief and what that, how do men first kind of bring it or acknowledge grief?
1 moment, 1 second. We pause it for a moment. There's somebody.
No, you're right. Yep, that's fine. Yes. So while we wait for Marco, it's really, really fascinating to explore all of these different aspects of grief. And I really should add in by saying that, everybody has their own very unique way of processing and moving through grief. So the focus here is for our men to be able to acknowledge it. So so that's what I just wanted to start to delve into that, Marco, like how And I know that grief is very, very different for everyone, but I feel that now that I've gone into this kind of all of these different conversations with different people about grief, at the beginning, if I go back to the start, you know, my understanding of grief was limited, but now what I know, you know, it's so multifaceted. So for your everyday man out there, what's some guidance you could offer in the ways on how they can first come to be aware that grief is something that they might be present and might need to be dealt with? Like, how might it show up?
Yeah.
What might be happening?
Yeah, no, I hear you. I just kind of looking into that. So first of all, from my personal experience, and interestingly, what I said when you invited me to the podcast, my first thing is, what do I have to say about grief? And then, of course, well, everybody has grief, and you've been through a lot of grief. And by learning to be with grief, it has transformed my life in a very good way. So I think, okay, yes, I have something to share. For me personally, as a man, of course, it is all the cultural conditioning, because grief is a feeling, right? And we just talked about it before. It just came to me that other emotions like happiness or jealousy, we don't say I'm happinessing or I'm jealousying, but you can be grieving, right? So to deal with grief, I guess grieving, I mean, there's many ways where we can maybe talk later about a bit, but in first instance, is grieving. The process of grieving is how you deal with grief, right? Maybe on the most basic level, to acknowledge that you're grieving.
Yeah.
And to allow yourself to grieve. And how can you get there is by, I guess, starting to feel, to allow feelings and be comfortable with your feelings. And most men in my life, they're all very comfortable with their emotions and expressing them and feeling them. But yes, there is many men out there, and I see it at my courses regularly, who are really still not feeling. And then what is good ways to feel, to start getting moving towards that? If you have struggled to embrace your feelings or be with your feelings or allow your feelings or express your feelings, and then, I mean, expressing in a healthy way, was yelling at somebody, there's also expressing your anger, and we all might do that at times, but there's better ways of expressing that. So good ways to start could be things like men's groups, like, just very basic, just sharing circles where men learn to sit and actually talk about something else than the foodie and the weather and their jobs, and actually about themselves. The beautiful how in men in the circle you always speak from I, so you're already forced out of your shell. Some mindfulness practice to really pick up some proper mindfulness from this practice and start becoming aware how energy moves through your body and with these feelings, how these feelings come and how they go, and actually start getting in touch with them slowly, so that when they come up in a nutshell, when they come up in real life situations, that you actually recognize them. And so you can say, instead of saying, what you're doing is just stupid, or that doesn't work, just go, you can maybe say, it makes me feel a bit insecure what you're doing now, or this makes me a bit upset or a bit scared, or so things like men's groups, talking circles, some meditation, some mindfulness, reading some good books on that kind of stuff, there is all that kind of stuff. I think we're talking about those first steps, right, to get in touch with feelings, and to also and if you don't say directly, just to really break free from the cultural conditioning, but that's easier said as done. But the crucial thing for men, I would say, is connecting with other men who are with their feelings, who live a bit more in their heart, who are on that journey. So connecting with those men, and I see it at my Didge groups too. It's beautiful, there's men who are really on that journey for a while, and men who are really new to that, and you see how quickly that becomes one hegemonist, how you say that in English, one hegemonist group. I don't know the word, you know, that we're all on that same level.
Same
That suddenly,
page.
yeah.
I guess you could sort of call it like the brotherhood. You know, I know some of the men.
But how fast that equals out, you know, like you have these men already starting and men already, and after a few sessions only, because we all long. One time a young man came into a sharing circle and we did a little sound thing, and then a sharing circle, my friend Byron Hillier, he did some qigong and some sound, and one of the young men, he was only 22, and he said, wow, when I saw this on Facebook, I really wanted to go on because I'm so fed up from working the whole week, and then Friday go to the pub and rah, 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 and drink it away. And I really thought, I want serious conversation. I want good conversation. I want real conversation. But none of my friends would like that. And then when the thing came to me, I said, like, if I can say one thing, I've seen many men come into circle. And many men said this, what you now said. And we have this idea, our friends don't want that, I don't like that. But 99% of them, I dare say 90% of men long for that. It's the environment. But if you put that environment of the pub and the drinking, of course, it can't go that way. So there's this, that even that idea that, suddenly as a man, you might feel with your friends at work, and they're still a bit like rah, 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 and you might feel, oh, am I a bit strange or weird that I suddenly start feeling these needs? But but they have these needs too. But, you know, like maybe not pushing hard enough. You know what I mean? But it's not, but once you put those men, I've seen men really super closed off. And once you put them in the right environments, then suddenly they start breaking up, open, and that's what's coming. So I think that is crucial. Environment, brotherhood. Yeah, that's definitely the first step.
Yeah, I think that's very, very powerful. You know, like, actually, one thing that I really, really love is when we kind of break down these, society, this is talking very, very general. We have these preconceived ideas or judgments that we have about, you know, other people or groups of people within society. And I love it when those rules get broken. It's like the classic story of like the rich man that rocks up into, you know, the car yard, the car sales yard in a, you know, in a thongs and a, you know, rough and ready beach gear or whatever. It doesn't look like a rich man, you know. It's, and I mean, I've had the same experience as a yoga teacher and working sort of in this sort of spiritual healing space. You know, your everyday tradies, deeply, deeply spiritual men, you know, and I just think it's, we just, like what you were saying, we have this social conditioning of what we think people are. And it's, when you put people in the right environment, it's amazing to see what unfolds. So I guess it highlights how important it is that these sort of safe places, these safe environments are created for our men. Things like the different, you know, the coursework or the sharing circles, even something as simple as like a local men's shed. It's really, really good.
It's interesting what you said also, that identity thing again, you know, you said like the yoga person, the yoga teacher, the tradie. That's not who we are, right? You know, that's just one role we play. But then people always identify us, or we identify each other with those jobs. And I think I have a few good friends who are actually tradies and working, and they're much deeper spiritually than many people I know who do spiritual work publicly. You know, they have much really grounded in depthness and don't get upset or in touch with their feelings, you know. So it's true, so we can I'm a tradie, but I'm also a yoga teacher. I'm this, all these masters.
No, it's great. I think we're kind of, it's a big thing that we're doing now, you know, not just men, but obviously like all of us, we're sort of breaking down these barriers, because at the end we know that when we take away, they're all just sort of these constructs of separation, aren't they? But really we are all one. Oh, I love, is he your little puppy?
Yeah, she's my partner's daughter, my stepdaughter's dog, and she's
cute.
She likes to run away. So she's just leaving the house again. So I gotta hold her a bit.
She's in safe hands.
Yeah,
so you mentioned earlier on when we were chatting that the consequences of not dealing with grief.
Yeah.
Acknowledging grief.
Yeah. Yes. So wow, that is indeed so, and this is for men, I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think for women to a degree we all do that, but I think women, even if they don't deal with grief, it's often in different ways than men who don't deal with grief, you know. So, but for me, so let's talk about the consequences. So for me, there was a lot of grief from even growing up as a child. You know, there was quite rough, fairly rough town, suburbs. Rough working class areas, little groups. All the suburbs had their own little gangs, kind of stuff. It was quite a fair bit of violence. When I was little, like as a 5-year-old, and beaten up by a 12-year-old. It wasn't a pushover. That was just being beaten up with a metal bar coming from school, and a lot of bullying. I had red hair and stuff, so there's a lot of grief, of not understanding. Then through your teenage years, as you grow up, so there was a lot of that kind of stuff. It's your grief from your family, from my dad, really great man, good man in many ways. But after I was 8 or 9, I don't think he said, "I love you" anymore, you know, because when I was a kid, I was fine. And so we have all those, you know, and it's my job to get over that anyways. But yeah, we carry all that stuff of him not being emotionally accessible. Let's put it this way, very clear. Not being emotionally accessible, told to get over it. So you got that toughening up. And then by the time you hit your mid-teens, you know, like that has become what you believe who you are, your identity. And for me, that led to, becoming a bit more violent myself. You know, that's like not really looking for it, but trying to stand my ground. And it got pretty wild, and drugs, all the stuff. And then I remember when I was 18, and I already had a really rebellious attitude, like fuck the system. You know, I was a little 60-year-old punk psychobilly kind of. Didn't want to have anything to do with any authority, and And then my uncle, he was like my dad. He worked his arse off, we say. You know, he always worked. You know, they would go. My dad too. You know, I'd see these men working 40 hours a week, and then go another 20 hours to cash jobs and weekends. My dad would come home at 5 and play with me till 7, and go out at night till midnight and get up at 4. And at the same time, he always made time for me. Quite amazing, you know, where they got the energy from. But why were they doing that? And as a very a child who questions everything, and then as a teen who is rebellious and questions the whole thing, and starts seeing how this world functions and all the corruptions and all that. I was really at that age, like 40 years ago, I was really all into all that stuff already. And I was like, what's the use? And then one day I remember we were visiting my grandmother, you know, and I was 18, you know, and so my parents were there, so I went to go see them, and it was like on a Sunday afternoon, and often they would gather. I was a bit older, I wasn't there always anymore, but you know, the whole family would gather and they have lunch together, and it was really that close-knitted family, really. And also we all live close together in Holland, you know, it's not like in Australia it's a bit hard. And and then he was sitting there, and I see him eating. He's eating his favorite sausage, whatever. And he said, "Oh, I'm going to work 5 more years, and then I'm going to sell the house. And I'm going to sell my house, and then I'm going to retire with my wife in somewhere in Schwarzwald, wherever he wanted to go live." And I still remember that clearly, sitting there. And then my mother woke me up that night at 3 a.m. Said, "Oh, your uncle has died. He had a heart attack that night, and he passed away." And he was kind of a role model for me in many ways, and working with him. And so for me, there was no like, everybody was in desperation. So my mother was in desperation, my auntie, my dad said, "Oh, people die," and whatever. He didn't, he didn't feel most of the women. I didn't see them deal with grief. I see them cry, but not really trying to push it away and smoke a cigarette and distract and go shopping, and that complete avoidance. And for me, that hit me so hard back then. And that was probably one of the main causes, with some other factors, that really triggered me going completely off the rails into a very, very intense, fully destructive life for about a decade before I snapped back from that. And not dealing with grief, not dealing how to be with grief, the feeling that, because that was a big part of that, right? Because there was all these feelings that catapulted, and then that narrative of, oh, this system screws you over, so for me, that was a confirmation that all my rebellious thoughts were right, and that there was no good in this society and this system. And then that combination of it suppressing those feelings. And how do you suppress feelings? Drugs are available, and so I think it's unhealthy. Another aspect of in later relationships, also when you when I came out of that period, also later as a Didge player, and still like even today, if I don't grieve, I'm going to take it out on other people, right? I'm going to, and that is not necessarily somebody dies, but if there's grief of somebody, because I feel my partner doesn't treat me right, or doesn't respect me, or doesn't acknowledge me, or whatever feelings we have, if I don't allow to feel that, then I'm gonna start blaming people. I start attacking people, or I start withdrawing. So the consequence of not dealing with grief, we could say, and for men it is like you're gonna have disconnection. Disconnection, and so you're gonna have unhealthy relationships. So you have unhealthy communities. So you have unhealthy role modeling for your children. So and there's many things, but I think grief is a big one in that.
As you were sharing all of that, it got me to thinking about, I love personally working with the nervous system. And I think because I like to really simplify things as much as I can for the everyday person that's out there, so that they can understand it and apply it to their own life. So everything that you've just said it's like these little attacks on our nervous system, what we would call the subtle energy body in the yogic philosophy, and probably I guess the Buddhist as well. And I think it's really important for our men to understand that, all of these little experiences, unprocessed, stay and trapped in that sort of subtle energy body, which is very closely related to the nervous system, and it creates these like little blockages, and it's sort of trapped in it, especially the heart, because the heart's so multi-dimensional. So we might feel that real contraction and limitation, and if we think of the heart as like a magnet, it when it's expanded and elevated, it's it's opening up, and we feel on top of the world. And then when it's contracting, we're drawing in, we're closing in, and you use those words just before, it affects our relationships. And so sort of coming back to the work that you do with the Didjeridu, the Marga, I've never actually heard that term for the Didjeridu. And that breath work that comes deep from that sort of sacral energy center, where again, this is the energy center that sort of governs the flow of life force through our whole body, and would really help to tap in. And it's also connected to heart because we take in the lungs, but getting it, all of that subtle energy moving, and I guess a very, very effective tool, anything that works with the breath, to process trapped stuff, the issues in the tissues, stuff in the body that needs to be worked.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Yeah, sorry, what did you?
No.
No, I hear that very clearly, and then for me too, it's like, so if you do so for men also to learn to be more gentle is very important. Like gentle, to me, crucial, gentle with myself.
Yeah.
Really be soft with myself, because men, however harsh we are, a man who is harsh to his children and his wife and whoever, I dare say, he's the harshest to himself. Only we don't see that. You know, it is because when I start softening up, I just, you know, the softer you become to yourself, the softer you become to others. Yeah. And also with feeling, or to go back to that before we go into that the breath thing, also that disconnect. You know, when you connect, you have to connect here with you first, with your feelings, with your emotions, and to the degree that you're not scared of others' of your own emotions and feelings, you're also not scared of others' emotions and feelings. And then if somebody expresses, so for example, we're talking about grieving, but what if somebody expresses grief to you? Just like I said, my father, good luck, just not comfortable with those emotions, so he could not be with that grief. So can you be with your own grief and sit? And then, you know, when there is something, your partner comes or a child comes, you can approach it very differently. You're not scared of that.
Yeah.
And then you can start seeing it. If somebody comes with grief to you, it makes you feel uncomfortable. So you don't want to feel uncomfortable. So you say, can we not talk about that now? Or just get over it, or whatever. You try to distract, or let's do something fun, have an ice cream, whatever. No, but actually, there's no reason to be uncomfortable. And if you come to a point where you have become so comfortable with your feelings that you can just leave them there, that's it. So this person triggers something in me, and then it's like, even not necessarily just with grief, but you know, we get that reaction, or you make me feel like this, or you trigger this, and I'm angry. So no, it's just anger. So be comfortable. So then, you know, so if it rises, that feeling, we can just see it. I'm feeling uncomfortable because of that grief, and we're out of breath already. You can breathe in and just leave that there for now, and be fully with that feeling, because there is space enough, you know, to have that grief of that child or of your partner, of that other person. And then don't worry so much that you might be a bit uncomfortable, and just be with that feeling. And that's often all we need to do, right? That's what we talk about holding space, right? To hold space, you got to be spacious. Yeah. When you're not spacious, you cannot hold space. When you contract, there's no space to hold. Yeah. So and then we come to that through breath and mindfulness. Mindfulness practice is so powerful. You know, mindfulness is mindful awareness practices. I personally don't believe that there is any way of really making deep transformations in your life that are solidified, and deep growth or spiritual progress without some form of a regular mindful awareness practice. I don't think it's possible at all. You know, you need that even to distinguish whether you're in your head or because sometimes head looks like heart and heart looks like head, and feelings mask us, you know, so there's. So, and then with the breath, and then breath work is so what I do in my courses. And also with the meditations we do at my sound healing sessions, the breathing, it's like, basically it's based on what we have, the Dirga Pranayama, I think they call it Dirga Pranayama in yoga, the 3 compartments, you know, below the navel, diaphragm, and in the Qigong and stuff, they look at the lower Dantian breathing, you know, and in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, there's the Shamatha, vast breathing. There's also more active anyone, but the Shamatha, vast breathing. And then with Indigenous, with Didjeridu players, you saw it the same. And then Miliwanga told me they even have a name for that point here, the second chakra. I forgot what she said. But we've been talking about that a lot the last few years. She has really opened up and teaching me some stuff that actually, I don't think they talk about that very often, but it was really amazing. And to me, that was wow, to seeing that all these traditions, and also I used to do Inupi ceremonies in the 90s, like Lakota style sweat lodge and stuff. In the late 90s, early 2000s for a while. And same thing, it's breathing below the navel. So, and for me, I see now that these kind of breathings, they activate the parasympathetic nervous system as no other. Yeah, and people can say you can do like a holotropic style breathing. It's not parasympathetic. You go in your fight flight. Even Wim Hof, triggers cortisol, adrenaline, and it's great. Wim Hof is there to strengthen your immune system, Bob, and give you that. It's awesome, but it's not good to come in a super calm, grounded, centered space. I find often when people also say you do a holotropic, and I do it sometimes. After that, you feel really calm and centered and grounded, but it's more like it's coming from an exhaustion. You did something very forceful, and you've been, there's a tiger, you run and run for your adrenaline, and then your endorphin kick in and stuff. That's true. So you come in such a space, but you can just sit calmly, bring your breathing, do your lower breathing, and do your mindfulness, and without having to put any stress on your body, you can come to that really calm space. But I think there is more awareness then, because if you do it after something like holotropic and stuff, then you're in that calm space, but you're a bit like spaced out. What if you go that path of lower than chin breathing and mindfulness? You're in that space, but you're very grounded, you focus, you're aware. And so for me, that is, if you say, for example, for men to learn to feel, holotropic and stuff is really good. Yeah? I've seen many men so blocked in their emotions, they do activating breath work, and they start crying and, just start all the shaking, and good, because they can't get in there, So that's great. That's so awesome. That is so needed. But then it's kind of a, you really push it out, right? To bring it out. So then if your wife dies in an accident, well, you don't need to push anything out, right? You're going to be overwhelmed with feelings. And it's not like in a session that those feelings go after an hour. So what do you do then? And then those kind of breathworks are not going to help you. They have no benefit. So, but if you can then and then don't wait till your wife passes away in an accident, start now with grounding breathing, compassion practices, how training your mind, how you think about things, grounding, mindfulness. And then when these big griefs happen, you can actually be with those feelings. We're talking about that space. So you hold space for others, but you also hold space for yourself. So you got to be spacious.
Yeah, my dog does the same thing.
Yeah, it's a little dog as well.
I'm surprised she hasn't actually heard the barking yet.
I'm not even going to try to tell her to stop. She'll mellow out in a second.
I do have to say that when I sort of was first exposed to the Wim Hof method. I never went to a proper workshop or anything, but I just learnt it by his YouTube channel. And when I began doing it as my own practice, I lost the rules of it. So he's got a sort of set framework.
Yeah.
And this is the way that I teach it now to all of my students, because I love to teach from the place of what I call a curious mindset, which can also be really, in a way, a compassionate mindfulness.
Absolutely.
And I like we're using the word curious because it takes away like that bit of pressure that our ego might want to say, especially kind of like that masculine part that is within all of us, to want to say, okay, I have to do it this way, like this is the way, like the rational mind kind of says, oh, I must do 20 to 30 rounds and then, hold it here for, 1 minute and then pause. And we kind of force the, you got the puppy, we force ourselves. But what I completely get rid of all of that structure, and I invite in the curious mindset to be, and I feel like this is what you're talking about with having the grounding. I just breathe into it, and I might follow a kind of a method for a while, and I'll observe the whole time. I'm observing how's it feeling in my body. I control, how intense I feel like I need to take it. And when I feel like I've activated enough, I'll hold that breath in, and then I just release it and let it all go. again, I sit there on the end of the exhaled retention, for however long it feels compassionate and loving to do that. Yeah, so I think that's a really valuable way to approach, the.
And it is interesting what you say, because so like Wim Hof in this sense is more like very immune system strengthening, achievement, breath. I guess that's how it's mainly sold, like you can sit in the ice and climb the Kilimanjaro in your undies, which is really cool. But of course that's tremendous health benefits, and I don't say it in a denigrating way. It's really amazing, what he does for people in the world and for men's health. And I do Wim Hof reading regularly myself, so I'm not saying it in that way. But what you say, it is also our intention, right? And that's beautiful. So whatever we do, our intention is crucial. An intention, an idea, even if we sit and try to mindfulness, and we can just it's nice to sit there. We can do mindfulness, just watch my thoughts or watch my breath, but it's also really good if we have an intention, right? To say, hey, I'm going to do my mindfulness practice so I can soften to myself. Also, that I'm not afraid to put you, and that's what you focus on. And then often in the Tibetan tradition, they talk about Chögyam and Chögyam, and that is like a reflection and remaining, kind of reflecting and remaining. So when they do, say you do a loving kindness meditation or compassion, it's a contemplation. So you start, for example, reasoning why, that other people are actually the same as you, that everything they do to be happy, and not because they really want to harm you. And I benefit people and I harm people in my longing to be happy and safe and secure, and to understand that all beings come from that same place ultimately, even sociopaths in a way, which doesn't mean we condone the behaviors, but so that is one thing which will also help you with the smaller griefs, right? What somebody does to you, well, they didn't really do it to you most of the time, although it looks like that. But so that's really powerful, kindness and compassion, and really powerful. And but also, what they say, they have that, so that you might do some contemplation, and then at some point you get that feeling, right? You feel that compassion. You feel that compassion, and then when you feel it, you drop it, and you just do your resting meditation. You just sit in that feeling and allow that. And what I assume here is, then while you're in that feeling and allow that, that strengthens those neurons, and and so compassion becomes slowly becomes more of a bit more compassion comes in your default way of being, so breathing, sitting, it's all good, but we need to have also for the more contemplative meditation, we need to have framework, we need to have intention, and then those two together, then really things start shifting, because if you only do the contemplating, you become a philosopher. And if you're just thinking, if you do only the calmness, the calm abiding, only sitting, then you get this fragile piece. When you're meditating, it's nice, but if somebody calls you an asshole, you're all upset. And so we need both things,
I love that. That's actually a really good way to put it. Let's talk, and so you mentioned before about impermanence. We haven't yet.
So now we go for this is my personal, and this is not, of course, I'm really coming from that Buddhist thinking philosophically a much, and my Indigenous more experientially being breathing Didge, but philosophically I'm very much aligned to the Indian continent philosophies, but even though like also some of the Hindu, like Vedanta and so that kind of stuff, and Vajrayana Buddhist, but of course I try to say a bit like what things mean to me now. So this is not like some kind of Buddhist lecture. It's, although I might use those terms, it's not like, this is not necessarily the Buddhist view. This is where I'm at now with this. And so for me, like, the impermanence and grief. So we talked about the grief of losing somebody, a person, where we always think grief, but then the grief of stuff that we carry, the grief of being hurt by somebody, or not the grief. But then you go, now we're getting there. The grief of not getting what we want, or the grief of getting what we not want. Now we come, that is one thing too, right? So when we see in these, in a nutshell, in these yogic traditions, we're ignorant of who we really are. We're ignorant of true nature. And out of the ignorance, like in some traditions, basically in the Buddhism say ignorance, attachment, aversion, we don't know who we are. And we don't see that we're connected and one with everything. So we see all these objects and things.
Yes.
And we have three reactions, either as attachment, aversion, or indifference,
Yeah.
And so we react. So that's one thing, right? So these are these patterns. And then there is the impermanence thing. So I just leave that there for now, that attachment, aversion, to see if we can bring that together. And then there is the impermanence thing, like impermanence. Our life is impermanent. That is the main worry, like in the yoga too, right? Fear of death, right? It's one of the glaciers there in the yoga tradition.
The one thing we can guarantee is that we will die.
Yeah, but it's also like fear of death. People say, "I'm not afraid to die." You probably have not felt into it enough yet, I would say, because that is really scary. But if you really, go there in the feeling, but the fear of death. So like. What we said before, like if my favorite shirt and somebody makes a hole in it, I can get really upset. Or if a relationship ends, or I lose my job, or I lose my car, or I have to sell my house and move into a caravan. That is, to me, that is all remembers of our own approaching death. Impermanence is constantly around us and we don't like it. We don't like impermanence because it reminds us that we are going to die soon too, and we never know when it's going to happen. So there is a fear there, right? And then how can we get rid of all that whole confusion of getting what we want, chasing all these desires, and it's never satisfactory, right? Like in the Buddhism, they call it the dukkha, the suffering. They say it's like 4 layers of suffering. The suffering of breaking a leg. I say it very simple. The suffering of change, that impermanence, but also they call it all-pervasive suffering. This restlessness. Even when we're on the Bahamas drinking that pina colada, some part of our mind, oh shit, I gotta go back to work, and there's this constant restlessness. So and how do we solve that? By finding who we truly are. This is what the spiritual traditions say or tell us. So if we come home through practice to find the self in the Hindus or the Buddha nature, whatever traditions, or find the union with God, whatever these traditions say, but that's when all that ends, right? And then it's interesting. So we have the grief. So I see that also as a grief from the moment the soul, if you believe a soul, or the individual perception, the ego came into being. From that moment we kind of forgot. We lost a bit touch with that who we really are. So I believe, because we still have that knowing deep in us, so we have a grief, that is existential angst, existential grief. We carry a deep grief that we fall from the Garden of Eden or something like that. Like I do not believe that Catholic way, but not as in the literal sense. But we were out of that state of grace. Yeah. We lost that, or maybe we haven't been there, but we know that it is there. So there's a constant grief. So this is a very deep grief. And that causes suffering to our life, to everything we do. And so I believe if we work with that grief, then grief as we know it now is not an issue. It's not a big deal anymore. When we come to a point, and I don't say we're going to be enlightened. That's not that's going to take lifetimes, many lifetimes probably, but it's really hard. But just to the degree that we find some spiritual tradition that we feel attracted to. I'm talking with Christian mystic, not so much that fundamental and all that Christian, but the mystical Christian traditions, or like the Muslim Sufism is Muslim, like amazing depth, the Hindu, Buddhist, some indigenous traditions. And if we find something that gives us that a framework, some intellectual, and we might have a little glimpse of a feeling. So I think that can really help us to come more to an acceptance of life. And through that, then we can bring more compassion in and more understanding, and we become a little bit less afraid. And if you're a little bit less afraid, we're a little bit less afraid of impermanence. And then grief is something. I think that like how you deal, like what I said before, like when before we talked, when somebody died, with my uncle, when he died, I was everybody around me was desperate. or blocking it off. So that's the only things I knew. And now through my spiritual practice and teachings and stuff, and now when somebody dies, before I even cry, straight away I go burn some incense, do some pujas, do some prayers, because you can't actually do stuff for these people, you know. And even if somebody says, well, maybe how do you know that it's true? Okay, maybe it's not true, but it's helping me now to be not desperate and not be sad, to be actually joyful. So even, you know, if you want to argue whether it's true, then my reply would be, well, what do you be? You want to be miserable and desperate? You want to, or you want to have the illusion that you're actually doing something positive, but you can remain joyful and happy through such a process. So even if we just a biochemical reaction, there's still benefit in pursuing a spiritual path or vision of you.
Yeah, and I love to even simplify it, you know, for people that might not be sort of spiritually inclined. You know, I just think there's some, you know, if we just to break it down even to, like, say, the laws, the physics of nature, and, you know, even science, I think it's really, really fascinating. I actually feel like we're at this point in time where we're so close, if not already there, in this merging of science and spirituality. And I think that to make it really, really simple for some people, just anchoring into something like observing nature and, you know, acknowledging all of these kind of the laws of, you know, the natural world as something for us to
absolutely
anchor into.
Absolutely. I like, even like in Buddhism, you know, when there's also these texts and they say, as a Buddha, what did you do? I sit by the river, you know, watch the river, watch it. You know, so of course that you know, we can make it as complicated as we want with all kind of conceptual constructs, but just to sit in nature and observe, that also gives you that, because we talked about that feeling of spaciousness, you know, being spacious and open. Well, nature does that, right? Nature does that, and seeing the impermanence and how things come and go, and that is good. Nature does that, you know, and seeing the compassion, we can see that in nature too. You know, the Mother Earth feeds us, and animals protect their young, and so definitely agree with that. You know, like and I don't think what we're talking was a bit philosophically, but to do such practices, you don't need to become in some spiritual tradition or religious. You can practice mindfulness. You can practice compassion from a humanist point of view. You know, you don't need to, you know, it's a bit hard to capture so much in a short session, but the idea is always the same, right? Spend some time. Mindfulness, you don't like mindfulness, not spend some time with yourself. Do some quiet sitting with yourself, you know. Like,
quiet sitting. I think that's just a really nice, you know,
what was it Pascal, that French philosopher? I think Pascal was his name. You know, he said all human problems stem from his incapacity to sit on a room quietly by his own. You know, like that.
Yeah, and they also say, you know, there's quotes about like boredom and how, you know, some of the world's greatest things have come out of those moments where we've been bored.
Yeah, boredom. Yeah. I think boredom is beautiful, especially also when you do mindfulness, you get really bored. But once you go through the boredom, it's really very pleasant space, huh? Behind it. And maybe you asked me to share something about my father. Did you?
Well, just wind up with that? When we caught up and you shared with me the story about how you, I think you sort of resolved.
Yeah, because that might be fine. Maybe nice to finish up with too. You know, like because this is more about also forgiveness as a way of solving grief. And so with my dad, like what I said, he was. In a way, he was amazing, always there, doing things with me. He was amazing. You know, he had so much energy, always busy. But in the being with me, you know, on an intellectual level, we could talk like, hey, you're making a mess here, you know, and you got to change it. But, you know, in the feeling, it was just not possible. And then later we went, we must start making some trips together. First, we went to Ireland. It was the first time we talked, and then he said, oh, I really love you. And he cried, you know, and I was about 33 or something, or 32. And I was like, oh, I've not heard that for 22 years. But then a few years later, we've been to Arnhem Land and everything, took him bush and making ditches. But one time we were in Broken Hill in the bush here when he came to Australia, and I'm sitting in the car with him, and I'm like 37. And we're sitting on this campground, and I start being so needy and demanding to him after I'd already done like 10 years retreats, all this stuff. I said, but you never can say that you love somebody, or you always, and I start making all these acquisitions. Not full acquisitions, but needy and kind of. I expected him to say something, to do something, to get rid of my grief that I felt, that missing out of my dad. Of my dad, of never being emotionally available. That's actually what it is. He was never emotionally available because he couldn't. And so that built up a lot of grief. And that moment, I just at 37, and I was really like, I was demanding. I was like, you're not going to leave this spot now before this is solved, you know? And I felt that I was getting more and more pushy, like, I want you to not be you or whatever. I was demanding that. And at some point I look at him, and he sits in the car and he's crying. And he said, hey, I don't really know what you're talking about. All I know is that I am ever giving everything for you and your mother and your sister, and I left everything behind that I wanted and that I needed, what he wanted, all his dreams. And I realized it was true. He was like, you know, he had all these dreams of traveling the world, this and that. He literally gave up all his dreams to be a provider. You know, he was an old school man, you know. And then suddenly I could look through his eyes. I could see it through his eyes. And that moment, all that resentment dissolved, all that grief was gone. It just was gone. And then in that moment it opened up, and then over the weeks after, it just completely dissolved. So that is also to really, which relate to compassion too, to try to really to see how something looks from another person. And for me, if there is the moment you can see fully to the eyes of the other, forgiveness is already there, and grief heals. You don't even need to do it anymore. There's just no other way, almost in my experience. If you really see, you know, all that the resentment and pain is gone, and that was beautiful. And then I wrote him a poem the next day, and when I came back in Holland, you know, he had that poem in a frame, you know, above his bed until he died, and so beautiful because we did that. And he also, a few weeks later, after that moment, when he was back in Europe, I spoke with him on the phone, and he said, yeah, that moment in the desert, that really opened a lot up and changed. I said, oh, did it? Because I didn't expect him to get much out of it. And he said, oh man, I see everything completely different now, you know. And he was really so for him, that was also completely unexpected, because that might even be that, you know, when we talk about energy, bodies, subtle bodies, that tension that I hold, he feels that, and that doesn't allow him, you know, to go in. And so basically when there is that forgiveness for me, even the moment when he went back on the plane, you know, that energetic connection is different. So I gave him permission also in a way to let go and not have to hold that strong and all that. And yeah, anyways, that was really powerful. And then when he passed away a few years ago, it was really good to, when he died, the first days I was sitting, and I just felt in my heart, and sitting in front of my shrine, I'm really feeling in my heart, what is there left that I need to say to you? And I just couldn't find anything. It was good. It was completely good. And then I didn't cry the first few days. And then after 3 days, I had to pick the music for the funeral. And then there's about layers of grief. So my 37-year-old had already kind of forgiven him and stuff, you know. But actually, that was a men's retreat a few months before he died. I went to a men's retreat, and there actually I saw that my 5-year-old or 10-year-old still did not understand. You know, when in that shadow, that child aspect there. Although my 37-year-old had forgiven my dad, but that child still didn't understand and still felt hurt. So I had to also do work with my own shadow stuff to heal that child. And let's not go into there how to do those things. It's not a podcast. But anyways, I did that too, and those months, and then boom, for some reason, at that man's retreat, that came up, and 3 months later he dies. And then when it was beautiful, because when I was picking the music for the funeral, and then I was all these songs that he used to play for me on his guitar when I was a child. Every Sunday morning, he would sit 2 hours, because the only day he didn't work, and he played all these songs for me, And so I was listening to that music, man, and then, oh man, it just hit me, and I think I cried nonstop for about 1.5 hours. And I cried as a man, and I cried as a teenager, and I cried as a child, and I cried as a baby, and I could just hear my crying for, oh, it's my dad, I miss you. And I just let it all. I allowed myself to cry, and I just had this big 1.5 hour crying session, and it was beautiful. And because there was not much stuff left, because we had forgiven and stuff, that actually allowed you to grieve too, So that's especially for men, when there is issues, when you have emotional stuff with your father, with your wife, with your kids, whatever, just do it now and deal with it, because when they pass on, it will be so much easier to grieve and accept and let go.
And even that could even be not so much like if someone passes in terms of death, but it could be like the ending of a relationship,
Absolutely.
for our partners, because we never know. We can never ever be 100% sure that we're going to stay with that partner until the day we die.
Absolutely.
It could come to an end, and just because it comes to an end, it doesn't mean that you go your separate ways forever. You might have a child together, and you need to be able to sort of maintain a sort of fairly healthy connection. So,
and to the degree that you do the healing, that becomes easier, right? And also how you walk away. Just the difference back that we were doing these men's retreats with Christian and Damien and Tony, and I had to step back from that for a variety of reasons. But we worked really intense together. We did for 6 months. There was no captain on the ship. Everything was consensus based, and we were forced such different characters. So at some point it was really challenging and difficult. But what we were committed to was to speak without holding back, and to listen without resisting. So nothing ever built up. We had difficult moments, but we always said, we had our meetings, we said, we listened, we walked away and contemplated what the other man had said. And through all that period, we always found not like a compromise, like a real consensus, and it came natural the whole time, because we all were actually interested in hearing the other and seeing their perspective. And then when I felt I had to step back, I wasn't so clear. And then there was a few things we had to organize it differently, business-wise and stuff. And so even then, although we were so good, at some point there was some miscommunications a bit. And it was a bit like, we got a bit triggered and stuff. And at some point, one of the men said, "Oh, wow." I said, "This is like leaving a relationship." I said, "I really love you, man. I love you, man, so much. And you all have these beautiful qualities that I wish I had. I have other qualities, but we all are seeing these qualities." And said, "It's no surprise that, some feelings are going to come up." And so there was actually sadness. There was a grief there too, because I found this the most difficult collaboration ever to leave. Because it was so beautiful, so powerful. There's such beautiful men. What we did was amazing. And at the same time, I've never left any collaboration or friendship. So you don't leave the friendship, but so joyful. So that is that thing too, to acknowledging grief, dealing with things heads on, so it can't build up, no?
Yeah, so I guess it's the ultimate personal responsibility.
Absolutely, you hit it there. That's the hammer on the nail.
Yes.
Taking responsibility for everything you feel.
And that's the empowerment, isn't it? That and that almost forms part of that sort of anchoring into this the truth of who we are. When we can anchor into the self, the I am, the truth of who we are, it's empowering, because from when we know how to access that space, we can take our personal responsibility from that space. It becomes this tool that we can just very easily access at any time.
And that's the thing. This is why, like, we can wait till we grieve, but when life is well, that's when we need to practice and do things. And that's what I said with the sound sessions, the sound therapy. I do the integrative sound therapy, but also the, in the group sessions, it's really about that. I work a lot at other people's retreats and stuff, like, so just go in and do my sessions. And for me, I call it always the inner abundance, the heart space of inner abundance, because it's also related to that, we are, and the two true breath, sound, we really activate that sympathetic, and then do some guided contemplation. It's we can maybe not get to the essence of that space, but we can definitely tune in and feel, and that becomes something. The more we can go in that heart space, that becomes something that carries us through life, right? And for men, it's about, for all men, it's for all humans, but for men, it's about time that we just stop playing tough and playing hard, and we just have to be able to say that we're scared little boys at times, and not also that embracing yourself and not having to hide your screwed upness, not even trying to hide it. That's really freeing. That's very liberating, I find, But I can say now, when people say, some people say that, oh, you just say that, you're just really so vulnerable, or you don't care, or people hold that against you. I say, no, because I know you screwed up too, like you just still playing that game so much. I think that helps, I think we did that at that when we did that at the acknowledgement at the yoga festival, we had that too, about that we all, and that was really nice to start today, to all come from that acknowledgement that we all really lost, and in many ways, and that we all always doing our best. If we consider all factors, our karma, our upbringing, our relations, our physical limitations, our beliefs, which is karmic, our beliefs, all that stuff. If we consider all these factors, we always doing our best. Yeah. So we can stop beating ourselves up, really.
Yeah, I think it's a nice practice to, that shifting of perspective, kind of zooming out and seeing things from a more expanded perspective, and knowing that, like, if we're in the thick of something that's painful and suffering, say it's a grief of some sort, knowing that, if we kind of zoom out and think of it from a collective, or and knowing that we're not the only one going through, that can also be very, very comforting. Knowing that other people are going through suffering, it sounds a bit funny, but there's so much value. Is there anything else that you felt? I feel like we've covered.
Yeah, I think it's also like, keep the time, otherwise it becomes an epos. But I just want to, maybe I'm happy to slowly wind it up, and I just want to acknowledge you for the amazing, beautiful work you do in this community.
Thank you.
I find really, and like I said, it surprised me a bit. Have a podcast on grief, but not only was it really very interesting for myself to feel into that, to look into that, and to actually, hey, what is grief in my life, and what does it mean to me? Although I've been doing all these processes and work, you know what I mean? If people ask you, you actually say, oh. So really, to bring awareness, to put my awareness, and then just doing this was actually a very healing exercise in itself.
It
to
has
have
been
these conversations and acknowledging. So that's beautiful. So I want to thank you very much, and really honored to be able to share my experience and viewpoints on that. So thank you very much.
It's been so valuable, and really we can see the intention was to have this focusing on the men's grief. However, I will add that there's a lot to gain for our women to listen to this and understand this work, and to also hold space for our men, our brothers, our partners, our fathers, our sons, to move through it and to really promote it. So yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And I will make sure that when I do the post that we pop all the details of how people can get in touch with you if they really feel that call, if they feel that connection in their heart, or if there's a little something about the work that you do that really resonates for them. I definitely urge for people to reach out with you and let the journey begin.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marco.